Hey guys, Jim Vinoski with Manufacturing Talks. I've got a short one for you today. It's going to be a solo effort. I'm going to be talking about two things. One, I'm going to be talking about last week's Energy Futures Forum put on by the National Center for Energy Analytics, where I'm currently a visiting fellow. I'm going to dive into a few of the details with that phenomenal event, and then I'm going to give you updates on my upcoming book, American Manufacturing, 22 Tales of Integrity, Ingenuity, and the Modest Heroes Who Built a Nation. I'll be right back in just a couple minutes to talk about all of that here on Manufacturing Talks. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Okay, guys, let's get down to brass tacks. So yeah, last week I was in Washington, D.C. for the Energy Future Forum. This thing put on by my new outfit, a relatively new outfit, the National Center for Energy Analytics, in conjunction with RealClear and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and it was held at the Chamber of Commerce building right there across from Lafayette Square. So I'll preface it with, I signed up with NCEA back a couple months ago, and I have to admit I had no idea what I was getting myself involved in. I knew Mark Mills, the founder and executive director, fairly well. He's been on the show a few times. We've talked about a lot of things, and I know we're aligned in a lot of the things we think about. So glad to join the organization, but until I got to this event, I had no idea how influential it was and the kinds of people I was going to be rubbing shoulders with. So we'll dive into that. But Mark led things off last week, and really he focused on a couple of major points. One is the burgeoning numbers and size of data centers that are going in, and then what that means for energy consumption. So he kind of laid the groundwork for the day, which is we've got this skyrocketing need for energy, while a lot of places are making it harder and harder to access and to get and to use. And so, a lot of conflicting, I think, visions and activities that we talked about through the day, and lots of great speakers. I'm going to touch on each one of them very quickly. The program was packed with information, so I'll try to get across the main points. Senator Alan Armstrong joined us, and he talked about the need for permitting reform. I couldn't agree more. It's one of the major regulatory problems we have, and I'm hitting on regulations all the time in the manufacturing world that I talk about. Obviously, in the energy world, that's the case as well. We've got, as he put it, we have plenty of low-cost resources in our country, and the reason for high prices is lack of access, and that's a procedural inefficiency that we've imposed on ourselves. So permitting reform has got to be high on everyone's list of deliverables here soon. We had Ezra Yacob from EOG Resources, and he talked about the American increase of oil production. So that's a huge story, especially with the Iran situation. What we're seeing is a whole bunch of countries across the world who are in really crisis mode because their flow of oil has been throttled by the situation over there. We, meanwhile, have gone to this energy abundance paradigm under the Trump administration, and it has set us up well. Obviously, we're seeing increased prices for gasoline at the pump and other difficulties, but nothing like what the rest of the world is seeing, and that's what Ezra hit on. One big thing he talked about the need for was more consistent policy, and I've talked about that myself, how every 2 or 4 years we've got some major shift in policy direction, the latest being with the presidential election here a year and a half ago, where we literally jumped off from what was going to be us following the UK and Germany into deindustrialization under the previous administration to this energy dominance position of the current administration that I like much better. And it would be great if we could keep that consistent regardless of what party's in power. Don't hold out high hopes for that right now, but hey, a man can wish. We had Chris Womack with the Southern Company, so a huge energy company, and he talked about, um, you know, utilities and energy are only 5% of the US GDP. What people kind of miss is you don't have the rest of the GDP without that 5%. And so that's what Southern is constantly keeping in their sights. And he talked about a 5-year capital plan for that company being $81 billion. So they're not holding back on the needs and on delivering against those. And just talked a lot about the need for better policies. He talked a little bit about industrial policy and intervention to support things like nuclear and that kind of thing. And we're certainly seeing that with the current administration. The other big point he made was you have to make sure the grid works, and it's increasingly creaky. But yeah, I mean, we can talk all we want about nuclear, which was a huge topic last week, both during the session and in the private discussions I had all over the place with my fellow attendees. But, you know, adding nuclear plants doesn't help if you can't deliver the juice to where it needs to go, right? We had Toby Rice with EQT, natural gas supplier, and, you know, he talked about how our energy bills have gone up 40% in the last couple of years, and yet we're kind of the lucky ones because, like Europe is paying $15. I forget the measure, but for natural gas, whatever measure you use there, and I should know that, but I don't. We're paying $2.50, and so yeah, we might be paying more, but we're doing a lot better than most people. And natural gas is just this superpower of the U.S. In fact, at the conference, he was talking about how there were currently negative prices in Texas for natural gas, and so you know, obviously a huge deal around being able to generate what we need for electricity as well. We had Andy Power from Digital Realty. So he talked a lot about data centers. That was his focus, and kind of echoed what Mark had to say about we just can't even keep up with demand. And it was interesting, you know, Mark wrote after the fact a little bit about how I think he said 65% of people in the country are opposed to data centers in their communities, and yet how that flies in the face of their behavior because it's their use of computing power and increasingly AI that's driving that. And so another kind of conflict of interests among people there. And then, you know, Andy talked about we're in this huge breakthrough with AI, but what's the next big tech breakthrough? And then what does that mean for energy use? So we've got this huge burgeoning use of energy across the board, and a lot of it driven by AI, and who knows where that goes from here. Energy abundance was a theme throughout the conference. And again, the NCEA is all about sensible policies around making sure energy is reliable and affordable. And so it was a huge theme of the whole thing. Toward that end, we had John Baer from MISO, so the mid-country system administrator for, you know, the center of America's grid. I'm on it myself on MISO. And he talked about his job one is reliability. And he was very diplomatic, but, you know, he made it plain that he's got some states under his jurisdiction that are helping and some that are not. And Michigan is one that's not. We have our insane net zero policies enacted by our Governor Whitmer and her Democratic legislature that existed before. They pushed through these crazy requirements where we're going to be shutting down not only coal plants, but even natural gas plants and creating a huge shortfall in our state as to the power we're generating versus what's going to be required even right now, much less with the enormous increase that we're looking at because of all of the things I just talked about. And he did touch on a couple of the nuclear plants that are being restarted. I visited one just yesterday, Palisades, just an hour southwest from where I live, and they're marching right ahead toward repowering that one here in the next few months, and then Dwayne Arnold as well. And then, you know, I talked about gas. That's huge for MISO as well. David Rosner, commissioner with FERC, joined us as well. And, you know, he talked about we sit where we do today and things are already a little creaky, and then there's going to be this enormous additional demand. So he touched on, you know, how do you allow interim capabilities? How do you start toward that needed new generation capability? Things like temporary generators. And so policies to enable people to do what they need to do to get the juice they need while we build the infrastructure, restarting nuclear plants, building new gas plants, improving our grid, all of that. Automate interconnections. That's a really cool point he made. Talked about MISO doing that and reducing interconnection time from 680 days to less than 10. And so that's getting through the whole process of being able to interconnect with the grid. Obviously, that's enormous. And when we talk about permitting and reform, that's a very good example of what we can drive when we focus on the right things. We had Nat Sahlstrom from Meta. Yeah, I know. I was surprised, but he talked a whole lot about the changes within his company, and you think about where they've been and where they've gotten to. The building blocks he talked about for their technology are 10 times what they were 15 years ago, and he touched the point too. The infrastructure isn't there, and so we really need to be looking at ways to add wherever we can. He touched on the point of private grids. With Mark Mills was his questioner. They both talk quite a bit about that, and that's, I think, going to be an increasing discussion around get the public grid, but private grids and people providing for themselves off the public grid. That will get very interesting. We had Mark Hume from Blackrock. That one was very interesting because obviously Blackrock here in recent years has not been necessarily a friend of those of us in the energy abundance world. Mark talked about the energy divide west and east of Suez, kind of like what I touched on a little while ago with the Iran situation, and that situation has turbocharged it, but it's really been there, that increasing divide between plenty and not. And he talked a good bit about the shortages that are happening. I was unaware there's an LPG shortage in India, for example. Inventories of oil and gas and coal are being depleted around the world. Gas really, he said, is the problem, not oil. And so that's an interesting point as well. And then he talked about their investment being huge in the next couple of years for data centers. So kind of reinforcing that opening point. We had Piers Norton from ONEOK. And so this was more about kind of a primer on gas and how it comes out of the ground. I was aware a little bit, but this was interesting science. There's 3 kinds of gas. He pointed out dry gas, so you can kind of almost use that coming out of the ground. Wet gas that has some hydrocarbons incorporated with it, and then associated gas that comes with oil. And so a huge amount of processing to get that free and be able to use it. He talked about the need for more pipelines. So when we talk about infrastructure, it's not just the grid, it's also pipelines where things have gotten very creaky and aged. There are more miles of pipelines in the US than paved roads, and 100,000 trucks moving oil and gas in the US constantly. US has doubled gas use over the last 20 years. So just enormous things that people just don't even think about. And that's all before the AI world hits us. And so reliability is affordability, he said, and clearly we've got work to do there. We had Matt Neal from Seimens, and he focused a bunch of his presentation on yttrium. And so a mineral you don't hear a lot about, and it's really his main need for Seimens being in the gas turbine world. That's what those turbines really require, a very rare mineral that obviously, like everything, we've given up on mining for ourselves and relying on China and other not necessarily friendly areas for it. And so Seimens is in huge demand for the turbines today, and they're trying to deliver the goods, but those challenges of really the materials world is what brought Mark Mills and me together originally. He had done a discussion about how the grandiose electrification plans of several years ago just weren't even feasible because we would not have the minerals to make them happen. And that's what we heard certainly from Siemens. We had Nicole Holmes from GE Vernova, and so she's over the nuclear activities there. They've got small modular reactors similar to what Holtec, who I visited yesterday at Palisades, has going on. And so, kind of the bright future of nuclear energy, getting away from those one-off constructions. I mean, Nicole made the point that it's the cost craziness driver for nuclear. It's not just this, but a big part of it is we've built one-off nuclear plants again and again and again and again. You never get any kind of economy of scale doing that. So she mentioned how she has told her team SMR, small modular reactor, getting to be a common term, but she also stresses that S also needs to mean standard. And I thought that was just a brilliant point. And she also made the point that nuclear should be boring. And I think we're getting there. The kind of horror stories of the past and things like Chernobyl and the 3 Mile Island truly are in the past. We've gotten to where we can run these things reliably and have an episode like Fukushima where it made such waves, and yet from an environmental problem and certainly a human impact problem was really mostly a non-event. So very interesting stuff. We had Jesse Ausubel from Rockefeller University. He was focused on the environment. So kind of flying in the face of some of what the theme of the day was. And yet, we can't ignore that. There are plenty of people who have that as a top priority. And so he pointed out we're already paying carbon taxes in the US. So people aren't aware of that. And if we continue to restrict oil and gas, that takes away from what the government can earn from those taxes. And so there's also a policy discussion that needs to happen, to fund the government. It's kind of like the EV discussion you may have heard, where they're not paying road taxes because those are all done through gasoline purchasing. The same thing. If you restrict oil and gas, there's a whole lot of other taxes that don't get paid. And then how do you run your government? Let's see. We had Zach Dell, and I forget where he was from, but he talked about innovation, the creation of new value-based power. He's a battery company. And so they're really focusing on co-locating batteries where the loads are to minimize the amount of transmission that you need. And, he sees a huge opportunity. The market penetration for home batteries in the US, he said, is less than 1%. And, certainly as we have these challenges because of some of these difficulties we're facing with burgeoning power requirement and, increasingly creakiness in providing it, people having their own backup, whether it's a battery or a generator at their house or at their business, I think will become increasingly frequent. And so, his company will probably do rather well. Damion Shelton was with Agility Robotics. I know this is one of Mark Mills's pet topics. He and I actually had the debate over whether the humanoid robots made sense versus those of us in the industry think about industrial robots, which are not humanoid at all for the most part today. And I mean, he had some really great points around, rather than having to redesign jobs, you have jobs that are already designed for humans to perform. And if you have a humanoid robot that can do that, then you're ahead of the game. And so, Mark was interviewing Damion, and he made the point that robots eat too, which is correct. Not the same thing we do, but gets back to that energy piece. And if we have this glorious robotic future, that's yet another draw on our increasingly in-demand energy base. Damion touched on a couple things, priorities for them, safety being huge. You have a humanoid robot. This is something I hadn't thought about. If it fails and it falls over, it's not a light piece of equipment. There's someone nearby. It's an injury waiting to happen. And so something they have to think about. And then task relevance, which gets back to that point that Mark and I had in our discussion. And then he also talked about how we think about robots kind of in the absence of the AI discussion, and yet the two converge. And, you can't have a robot hallucinating like we hear about AI hallucinating in searches and things like that. If a robot hallucinates, has bad information from AI, then really, really bad things can happen. And we closed the day. Our last interviewee was Daniel Yergin. So quite the superstar to end the day with. He's with the S&P, serial hit books, and he made the point: you can't make multi-million-dollar investments and have the rules change every 4 years or 2 years. To my earlier point about our policy situation in America, and that's what's happening. So that's going to be a real challenge for us. And he reiterated that. He also talked about copper demand, and we've touched on that. Again, it came up in that original discussion in the original Mark Mills show here several years ago. Copper being one of those elements. He talked about not being available in the quantities we would need it for the electrification plans that people were touting back then. And Daniel made the point that the expectation is demand for copper will increase 50% over the next 14 years. And there's just a whole bunch of things around energy production and energy transmission that kind of fly in the face of some of these themes of the grand transition and all of that. And Daniel kind of closed with the point that we shouldn't even use the term transition when it comes to energy anymore. It should be about addition, because really, to get all the energy we need, we're going to have to apply every form possible. So that was the Energy Future Forum. Met a bunch of great people, both with the NCEA and other folks who were there. Sat next to two very interesting people. One who I had been trying to connect with and failing for a year or two, and that was Stephen Koonin, the author of Unsettled, a book I read that just bowled me over. And his point being that when we talk about settled climate science, it's anything but. He tore into that, and then also went into some of the mitigations like carbon capture and how really foolish that is. If you haven't read Unsettled, you should. He's got a newly expanded version out that I learned about sitting there with him in Washington last week. Got it already, ordered it, and received it a day or two ago. And then I sat also with Joanna Kruger, who is from the Canadian consulate, and she focuses on energy. She talked a good bit about how Canada, and I knew about this, they've been providing energy to New England, hydropower that they're sending across the border, and now they're going to be providing to New York City as well. And this I didn't know about, Canada is re-upping on their nuclear plans, and I'm actually going to be diving into that, hopefully with some resources that Joanna is going to hook me up with. So we kind of admitted that things are a little frosty between Canada and the US today, but there's a lot of reason for optimism. That's it for the Energy Future Forum. I loved it. It was a phenomenal experience, and it gets me very fired up for the work I have coming up. I'm reconnecting with my friend Sean Hyatt out of USC today to work on our our issue brief about the nuclear workforce. So that'll be coming out here within the next few weeks. We're getting that nailed down, and then we're planning on some op-eds coming in behind that, obviously focused on some of the particulars around the challenges with the nuclear workforce, technology and trades, people who are in high demand and really just won't be there in the numbers to deliver a quadrupling of the nuclear fleet like President Trump wants by 2050. And then I'm going to be diving into mitigations as well, and I touched on some of those in the issue brief in my writing so far. And it was really interesting going to Palisades and meeting with the Holtec folks, because in digging into that, I realized they've got several of those mitigations that they're actively working on. So restarting a nuclear plant, that's a huge opportunity. Rather than building new, is to go into the ones that have been shuttered. And if they haven't been decommissioned such that they can't be brought back, we need to be looking at restarting them like Palisades is. And then advanced technology. So Holtec is planning to do a fast follow after they get the legacy Palisades reactor running later this year. to install 2 of their own SMRs and effectively double the generation capacity on that site. And that's huge. Michigan needs it, MISO needs it, the whole country needs it. And then the last is the work they did on workforce and training and the things they did to get people back after they had closed the plant a couple of years ago, realizing they were going to need even greater numbers of people. So getting back people that were willing to come back and then using those people to seed, the training and the onboarding for the new people that they're going to need for the future. So that's huge. That's it for that. My book. So yeah, it's coming. It's coming fast. Got the cover art I'm putting up right now. I love it. I think my cover designer did a bang up job. It really speaks to exactly what I wanted to get across on the cover. And we're down to the brass tacks. I've got the final edited copy that I need to review this week and get back to my publisher, Motivation Champs, and Dominic Damaski. Love that guy. And then I've got a little bit of wrap-up work around picture credits. And then he's going to have the whole text and be off to the races. So I should have a publication date for you very soon. And I will be doing a newsletter focused on my book coming out on LinkedIn probably in the next couple of weeks. I will also I've been putting together a list of kind of high profile people that I'll be emailing to ask to help start spreading the word. I think it's an important book. I think the moment it was really interesting at the Energy Future Forum by the NCEA. I noticed this parallel. Nuclear and manufacturing have the same thing going on. This moment where it kind of became, an unsavory topic for a couple of generations, probably, maybe 3. And then now it's not only come back, it's like completely flipping and becoming very positive. Both verticals are in a moment that I don't think anyone's ever seen, where it seems like everything's aligning to push both nuclear and manufacturing forward and to bring them back in a big way to America. And I couldn't be more excited. And I think my book helps support that. The whole point of my book is twofold. I may have mentioned it before, but I'm going to mention it again and again and again. And it is, number one, to talk to the general audience out there who think that we in America don't make anything anymore. That couldn't be further from the truth. We're still the number 2 manufacturer in the world. We should be number 1. I think that should be a moonshot goal for us. And I think if we only brought back what we need to truly be where we need to be from just a national defense perspective, so that includes shipbuilding, chip making, and textiles alone, we'd be back to number 1. And we should do that. And so, yeah, I present stories of 22 companies, most of them multi-generation companies. Got one, Revere Copper, that has literally been around since the founding of our nation, founded by Paul Revere, remember him? And a whole bunch of other companies that, yeah, they've been around doing things the legacy way. And we're looking at new and innovative ways to do manufacturing, lots more automation. AI is playing a part. But these companies that have been around and been fighting the battles for literally generations, they have something to teach us. And so we should be learning that. So one point is getting it across to people that we're still a superpower in manufacturing in America, and we should be more of that. And the other is industry insiders. You need to be looking at these companies that have been doing it for a long time and learning about how they've withstood the storm we threw them. I mean, hyper regulation and the negativity around manufacturing, again, for generations. And yet they've been plugging away and making very cool stuff made by very cool people for a long, long time. We should be learning from them. That's it. I'm done. Next week I've got Benny Bueller. He is from a company called Uptool, and he is going to be telling us some exciting stuff about how AI and new ways of looking at how to do business processes in manufacturing are going to drive us forward, kind of that, new technology end of the manufacturing renaissance. So Benny will be here with us next week, and we're here every Tuesday. So tune in. We'll be here. We'll have a great show for you. Until next time, I'm Jim Vinoski with Manufacturing Talk, signing off. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.